here. So we're going to interview my other right hands, Rick Talcott and Jay Worden. So would you welcome them up? And I wanted to get these guys up here. Obviously, most of you know them very well. I've known them for many years, but God is doing an amazing work in their lives and even bringing them here. We all share the three of us share this similar story of being in corporate America and then God opening doors here at Compass Bible Church to come into full-time ministry and then seeing God transform our plans that we had for our own lives and aspirations working-wise and bring it here and continue to use these two men for his glory and do it in a great way. And so, as you know, Rick Talcott is our CFO, one of many things that he does here, leads that department and facilities and a whole bunch of other stuff. I don't even know. You do a lot of stuff here. But he has his hands in a lot here at the church, and he provides great wisdom for many of us just when it comes to finances, I should say, and many other things. And then, of course, Jay Worden is our director of Focal Point. And so all that we're able to do with Pastor Mike on the radio, Jay is in control in that and handles that and does a great job with that. And we've continued to see that ministry grow year after year. And if you're not signed up for the dinner, then we'd love to have you there. So I'll take that plug so you didn't have to. Yeah, we'd love to have you there, but again, this is a ministry that continues to grow, and it's near and dear to my heart because it's how I found Compass Bible Church, because of my cousin listening to Pastor Mike on Focal Point Radio that led me to come here and check this church out, and you see what God was able to do through that. And so there's many other great stories with Focal Point. But anyway, how about that? I thought, how about my son's first time hearing somebody speak? It's Rick Talcott and Jay Worden. I think that highly of you two.
I'm sure he'll remember everything we talk about
You
today.
buy that one?
The two guys he really wanted up here weren't available, so.
Since you're here, just come up here. I don't have anybody else, so we'll get Rick Talcott and Jay Worden. No, well, this is a good time. Again, we all here are family. And like I said, many of you know their stories and you've known them for years, but I thought this would be a great opportunity for us just to really, as we do with all interviews, just see how God is able to work in our lives. And we come from different backgrounds, we come from different areas, come from different professions of work into full-time ministry or wherever we were at in life, and God brings us to submission to His will and His plan and surrendering our life to Him. So I wanted to spend this time to be able to really get to know Rick and Jay, if you don't know their story already, and then lead that as we do with all of our interviews all the way up to what they're doing currently today. And so I'm glad to have them up here this morning. And I guess, Rick, I'll start with you. But let's start and just, hear your testimony, hear your story, and then we'll go to Jay and work our way up to current day. Does that work for you? Is that
Sounds
okay?
good. If you're in men's Bible study, you've already heard this. I apologize, but it's the same. So I did not grow up in a Christian home. My parents were not Christians, and they went to church. We went to Lutheran churches mainly, but I was aware of the Bible. I had, gone to church with them dutifully. But they were not Christians at the time, and obviously I was not a Christian at the time either. Grew up in San Clemente, California, if you know where that place is. And I remember the first time somebody sat next to me. We were trumpet players. I was in the band. And there was a one individual trumpet player who was super edgy, and he was doing drugs and alcohol and all kinds of things at San Clemente High School. And he sat next to me one day and he said, "Rick, you've got to become a Christian." And I said, "Well, why is that?" He says, "Well, if you don't, you're going to go to hell and you're going to spend the rest of your life in hell." That was kind of the first time somebody had talked to me that bluntly. And I said, that was good for you, because he was in all those drugs. He became a Christian and he got off of them. His life was totally changed. And I looked at him and I said, "That's good for you, but I don't think I need that, because I'm not a sinner. I was a goody two-shoes guy. Even though my parents weren't Christians, I grew up in a very moral home. They taught me what's right and what's wrong. So I wasn't doing the drugs or the alcohol or the sex or any of those things at the time. So I had a hard time seeing myself as a sinner who needed a Savior. And I told him that. I said, that's good for you. I don't really need that. But then there were other people that came along the way during that time frame, and they told me, the same thing. And I could always look at their lives and say, no, that was you, that's not me. And one in particular, there was a guy in the swim team. I was also a swimmer, and he would share the gospel with me. And he said, Rick, it's like being in the pool, because we were swimming all the time. He said, you're either in the pool or you're not in the pool. And if you're not in the pool, you're against God. And if you're in the pool, you're not against God. And you can't put a foot in, you can't put a hand in, you can't put any one thing in. You have to be all in for this. But I was still struggling with the whole concept of, I don't see the need for me to do that. So fast forward, I went to San Diego State as a freshman, and for the first time in my life, applied myself academically and did very well. And, when you go off to school and you start to think on your own, it's like, what is life all about? And I started thinking about those things, and all of a sudden school was easy. I wasn't swimming anymore, but it was still pretty easy. I was a beach lifeguard, and I thought my life was pretty good. But I thought, is this all life is about? So I talked to a friend, and he said, you should transfer to UCLA. John Wooden's the basketball coach, and as good as you are, you could make the basketball band, and you get to go to every game. And
I
you get
thought you were going to say the basketball team. I'm like, you didn't tell me that.
No.
Wow, John Wooden recruited you.
Nope. But I said, man, to be able to watch UCLA basketball, that would be fun. And so I transferred up to UCLA, and school was hard. I had also had a breakup with my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, but we had a breakup. And so I'm at UCLA. I didn't have a girlfriend. School was super hard. And one day I walked into a classroom, and on the chalkboard up in the left-hand corner, it said Josh. And as soon as the teacher came in, they went over the chalkboard and they erased it, and they were perturbed. I go, well, that's weird. And then the next week, it said Josh is. Same thing. And this was in multiple classrooms. This just isn't one or two. And then the third week, Josh is coming, and the teachers would come in and erase it because they weren't happy about it. But it was Josh McDowell, and he was coming to UCLA. And I went. He was going to go 3 nights, and I went to listen. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell my roommate. I just said, I'm just going to go do this. And, of course, if you know Josh McDowell, he's all about the gospel and explaining it. And he always has a hook. At the end of the first night, there was something that he said that made you want to come back the second night. And so I went back the second night. There was another hook. I went back the third night. And he convinced me that third day that the resurrection was true. And really at that point in time, I had realized that, the analogy, you're either for him or against him. And then I realized I was just living my life for myself and that I was a sinner. And if the resurrection was true, that changes everything. Because now everything that all these people, including my wife and others, were telling me about how I needed to be saved or that I was going to go to hell, and Jesus is coming back soon. That was a Jesus movement. And anyway, he convinced me, so I surrendered my life that night. And my roommate, I went back to my dorm room, and he was torqued because he realized that I would probably be changed. And so he was mad at me, but I started seeing changes in my life that weren't the normal me. I'd be around some family conversations, and politically, the country was still in the throes of Vietnam and some other things, and so it was like, they have no hope. And so I began to see things in my life. I wanted to read the Word. I wanted to start going to church. A guy knocked on my door. I don't remember filling out a card, but some guy knocked on my door who's still one of my friends in life, and he mentored me. He got me involved in a campus ministry and just stayed on me to make sure I would grow, and that's how it all happened.
That's awesome. Praise God for that. But you eventually got back with Deb somewhere in there.
Yeah, we did.
Talk about that.
Well, it was one of those difficult things for me. It was the right thing to do. She was dating me. She was a Christian, and I wasn't. Since we didn't grow up in Christian homes and never been in churches, we didn't know very much. So it was a hard breakup on me, and so it was like I just wasn't ready, to see her again. And I remember I heard she was coming up to UCLA to visit a friend, and I'm like, okay, where can I go that I don't run into her? Because her friend was in the same dorm as I was. And so I had it all planned out, and I wasn't going to be there because I just wasn't ready. And bumped into her, told her I'd become a Christian. Of course, she was elated. And then that just started some more conversations, and it took a while, but yeah, that's how we got back together. Even though I'd been saved, I was still a little, wasn't mature right away, and I didn't know really what to do or how to do it. But yeah, we started dating again, and then we got married between our junior and senior year in college, so it happened pretty quick after that. We were going to wait till we graduated, and we thought, why wait? So I went to my parents and said, would you fund the cost for my final year? They were paying room and board. I had to pay everything else, and they said yes. They would do one more year, and then her parents said the same thing. And then my grandfather died and left us with $1,000. And so we thought we could make it. And we had side jobs and things, and we made it. But when we graduated, we had nothing in the bank, zero. And then God provided jobs for us. I had a job in November. She had a job shortly thereafter. So we were, as soon as we graduated, we went into jobs. But God was so faithful to provide us with that year of college, which was great because you're on your own schedule. You're not working. You got to go to class and you got to study, but you can also develop your relationship together as a couple. So
great. Well, thanks for sharing that, Jay. What about you?
About the same.
About the same. Ditto.
See, we had this pact that we were going to say, oh yeah, I got saved the fall of 1974 at UCLA. What else you want to know?
I can make that work. I've had to work up here a couple times. So
really make you work as an interviewee or viewer.
Yeah.
So there you go. I actually grew up going to church, mainly because my mom pushed it in our family and locally here in Orange County. But it wasn't a church that it was light, church light, let's put it that way. I was in high school group, and I was one of the leaders in our high school youth group, and went to Westmont College after that, spent 4 years there, actually 4 years, got out in 4, which was really great. Met my wife there, Lisa, and we got married a couple years out of college. We're down in San Diego, but we weren't really going to church. We had, actually at Westmont, anywhere you go, you can get in with the right people, or you can get in with the wrong people. And I just sort of drifted into the wrong people's side, and we weren't going to church. We weren't, wasn't something that was important. And so as we progressed in life, we were in San Diego, and we started trying to find churches, and just didn't find anything we really just connected with. And then we moved back. We moved to San Clemente in '95 because my job, I was working down there. They closed their office, offered me a job up here, and so we started going to a Calvary Chapel church down there, and we did that from '95 until about '97, '98. And they started saying some weird things, at least in our neophyte Christian, brains. We understood that I don't think he's saying what I think he's saying. So we kind of left that, and so we actually asked one of our neighbors who didn't go to church and said, "Hey, where do people go to church around here?" And they said, "Well, there's this little blue church up on the hill there down in San Clemente, and a lot of people go there," which happened to be Pacific Coast Church, where there's a pastor named Pastor Mike Fabarez was preaching. I don't know if you've heard of him. And and so we started going there in 97, 98, or somewhere in that range. And we went in there, and it was vastly different than any church that I had ever been to. I came out of there always just feeling like, that kind of hurt. Why did that hurt so much? And since I'm not a very smart person, it took me a couple of years to figure out that I was actually hearing the true gospel and what the true response was for the first time in my life. The church I grew up in, it was a lot of, God loves you, and, hey, yay God, but never really asked for that all-in kind of idea or talked about that kind of true transformation that, you're either in or you're out of the pool type of mentality. So I was hearing that for the first time, and so June of 2000, I realized in just a moment of, having lived life by my own standards and seeing that really didn't work out too well, I was convicted, and at that moment in June of 2000, I said, God, I'm ready to, I'm giving my life to you. I'm I'm done trying to live by my own standards. I want to live by your standards. And that came after a couple years of sitting under Pastor Mike and hearing the real true gospel and understanding what the right response was. And then, here I am. So
That's awesome. Well, yeah, and I'm right there with you when you hear the true gospel being preached. Because same thing with me growing up. It's like the church that I grew up in, it was a Bible teaching church, but at the same time, we weren't hearing the gospel week in and week out, and sub-congregational ministries and all of that stuff. And I remember walking out of there being like, dude, ouch, can we just get back to the nice stuff and tell me that I'm doing okay and, life is good? But, we needed to hear that. And obviously God continues to convict us through the preaching of his word, which is great. Because that's how he saves, through his word, right, and through the work of the Spirit. But so then both of you, obviously you're Christians, but you're working in the secular workforce. So talk to us about that, Jay. I'll start with you. What were you doing at that time in San Clemente for work, and talk about how you ended up here at Compass.
I drove.
That's fair. I could see y'all already had this lined up for me, like, oh man. Yeah,
I was ready for that one. So I graduated from Westmont as an English literature major. So there were a lot of jobs for that. And
that's why you have such a big vocabulary. He gets to use that.
I do have a vocabulary. I don't know how big it is, but yeah. So when we got married in '91, November of '91. That year I had asked Lisa to get married, and towards the middle part of that year, I started working in new home building, attract homes for my father. My father was a Orange County, Riverside, San Diego home builder, and he said, we have a job, an opening for low level, and I mean low level. Low level. Down, and I didn't want to be in the Irvine office where his main office was and where he was.
That's
said,
smart.
Yeah,
that's smart.
Yeah. So he said he put me down in San Diego. They did not have a job for me. They just sort of made a space. But that's always weird working. Nepotism is an interesting thing. Good sometimes, but. So I started down there in new home building, working in the sales and marketing department, but pretty much I was in the gopher department, so I just kind of did whatever. And I tried to work hard. I mean, that's kind of what I do. I knew I was the boss's son coming in, so I just worked hard and had a good attitude and said no to nothing and just kind of kept going on and on. But worked my way up through sales and marketing, and I ended up being a project manager down there for his company. But we ended up getting bought out by a big East Coast company in 1994. And if anybody remembers, the 90s and the mid 90s, it was not a great time for home building and real estate and all that other fun stuff. So. They closed our office down there in San Diego, and were consolidating everything back in their Irvine office. And so they offered me a job up there in Irvine, which was great. I looked around down in San Diego to see if there was any jobs down there, but of course, being the market being what it was, I said, okay, there's nothing here. So we moved as far. We didn't want to go back to Orange County. She grew up in LA County. I grew up in Orange County. We loved San Diego, so we moved into a place that was as far away as we could be from Orange County and still be in Orange County, and that was San Clemente. So that's what we did. And so we moved in there in '95, and I continued to drive to Irvine, but this company had a different kind of route for how they did it. They, project managers, typical things where everybody goes to the office and then you can kind of go out to the jobs that you're doing. This company put us on site and gave us a couple of different new home communities to build on. So I had a community here originally in Aliso Viejo over there off of Deerfield and Pacific Park, which was a condo community that we were building, about 100 units over there. And then I had another one in Rancho Santa Margarita, kind of right near the library in downtown Rancho Santa Margarita that I was doing as well. This is before the Aliso Town Center was here in the 90s. And, this was all, there was not a lot around this area, but I did that. So I commuted in doing that, so did both of those jobs. And then they sent me to, after a couple of years, to Fontana. They loved me, I guess, because they sent me to Fontana. So I was driving to Fontana every day for a couple of communities we were building out there. And then, I was up near Cal State Dominguez Hills. So we had a big 600-unit, master plan community that I was doing. I was processing things through the city, mainly getting maps approved and getting, through city council and all the things that needed to happen to get the land moved from what it was to be able to build residential homes on. And so I did that, and then once I did that for a couple of years and got things going, and it was I just kept going to the new places that I would start up. I ended up being the startup guy. So I would go to where they had new projects, and I would get everything going and get grading and all the utilities in and get models started, and then they'd bring somebody else to take over for me there and kind of going forward, which was really kind of cool because it was all the fun stuff. All that early on stuff is great because you kind of get into the home building process and the track homes, it kind of just rolls. And so, so I did all that. And then I left that company in 2000, at the end of 2000, and my dad had been out of home building, but he was doing land acquisition work. And so we would buy it, map it, and sell it to home builders. And so I started doing that with him from 2000 till 2007. And in 2005, Compass started up, and there was a lot of need around here. And so I started, working and doing whatever. I started helping out at Focal Point, helping with the golf tournament stuff. Jess Williams and I were running men's ministry here for a lot of years. And then I was like, hey, this is kind of cool. I started talking to pastors. I said, hey, how do I know if I'm called to ministry or not? And so Pastor Mike put me with one of the pastors, and I met weekly, and from end of 2005 through 2006, and eventually I transitioned into Focal Point in 2007. So been here for 16, is that 16 years? That's math. I was an English major.
You looked at Rick. Help me out here, guys.
I look at Rick.
A long time.
Yeah, that's awesome. And there was no background in that at all. Focal Point was other than you just volunteer helping.
Yeah, no. I had no background in radio or anything like that. So I can keep going, but I don't want to dominate.
No, that's
Rick
good.
will like it if I dominate, I'm sure.
It's like, keep going.
Well,
no, that's great.
Yeah. So it was. I knew nothing about that, but it is running your own. It's its own separate nonprofit, and it's what it was. It was running your own little business, and that's what I had done. Even at K. Hovnanian, when I was working for that home builder, we were running our own projects like we were small little mini home builders. We were responsible for every aspect of that, the financials, dealing with all of our competition. I was managing salespeople. We were working with our marketing department. I was handling all the accounting, and we were handling everything. I was dealing with the superintendents. We handled customer service, so on and so forth. So we handled all that, and then I had my own limited liability company when I left and was working with my dad, and so I was doing all that for myself as well, which, was instrumental in allowing me to, as I walked into Focal Point, and I'm like, okay, I don't know anything about radio, but I did know something about running a small little business, and this is what it was.
Yeah, and that's helpful. And I definitely want you to share just some of the things that most people don't know, challenges with radio and stuff like that here in just a second, because I know many of you probably give to Focal Point, or you listen to Focal Point, or you participate in the dinners and things, but it is interesting to think about just the radio ministry and where it is now versus where it was 10 years ago, and what are some of the challenges that Jay and team are having to work through with that. But so I want to hear that in a second, but Rick, tell us, not that you drove here, the other way that you got to Compass Bible Church from secular.
So I was always interested, and my wife and I were always highly committed participants in whatever church we were involved in. And I graduated with an economics degree, went to work for a big CPA firm, one of the big 8. There's only 4 now, but one of the big 8 at the time. But I was still asking God, what do you want me to do with my life? And you're active in a church, and the next thing you know, they ask you to do the budgets, and then they ask you to help them with this or help them with that. And so I did a lot of that throughout my career. I spent about 10 years with a CPA firm, and then I got an offer to work for, actually I got an offer while I was at the CPA firm to work for his dad. How weird is that, huh? I didn't even know Jay existed, but his father was a highly successful Orange County developer, and they needed an assistant controller, and they tried to get people from CPA firms. But I said no, I wasn't ready yet.
You heard about Jay.
No, I didn't hear about Jay. I mean, I really wanted to do this job. I mean, they had their headquarters in Irvine. They had a full racquetball court inside their offices and a full basketball court in the back warehouse.
And volleyball nets.
Yeah, I didn't know about the volleyball nets, but I'm going, man, this would be a great place to work. But it just wasn't right.
It was great for high school kids.
Yeah. So I did get an offer. I went to New York with the Big 8 firm. I came back, and I really didn't want to be a partner at this CPA firm. But God provided me an opportunity to work for a very large residential developer in Orange County, one of the largest privately held companies in Orange County. And all along, though, I've been volunteering. I was on a board of the Centers for Apologetics Research, actually a missionary that we support. I helped them form that at the beginning, and I was the numbers guy through all of that. I was on the board of Stony Brook Christian School for a while, and when they built their new addition, I handled all of the finances for that. So I felt like I was using my secular talents, even though I wasn't doing that. On December 16th of 1992, in Southern California, there was a real estate depression, and I was fired from my job along with a lot of other people. And 2 guys called me a week later and said, we're going to start our own home building company. We want you to be our CFO, and we'll give you a third interest in the company, but you got to handle all the books and everything, which I was used to doing. But I'm telling you all this because I tell people this: God prepared me for the job that I have today. He gave me a large public accounting firm with all of its bureaucracy that will drive everybody crazy, but very profitable. And then I went to one of the largest privately held companies where you don't have to do all the things that the big companies do. And then I got fired, and I got to join 2 other guys in a home building endeavor. And over the next 16 or 17 years, we built about 100 homes, or 50 to 100 homes every year. And we hit the market right. So we had made a fair amount of money, which we gave away. It was great fun to give that away. But then I sat in a message one day at Pacific Coast Church, and Pastor Mike Fabaris was doing something about, just life choices or whatever. And he looks out on the crowd and he says, some of you should be working for the church. I mean, that's a noble profession, to work for the church, even though I had been doing things myself all along. And I felt like he was just staring at me the whole time. And I was always interested in that. I mean, we knew missionaries, and there was one in particular that said, we want you to go to Colombia, Cochabamba, because they need you to run their operations. I thought, I don't want to be a missionary. I got to raise support. The concept of ABF wasn't in my mind. But that one message that Pastor Mike had really impacted me. So about 10 or 12 years into this 3-person partnership, one of the partners retired, and so the two of us continued on. And then I got to the point, to me, it was too risky. We had this big run-up in values, and I was a student of what happened in the real estate markets, and they go up and they go down, and they go up and they go down, right? Yeah. And so
He ain't lying.
we were kind of at the top, and I decided it was time for me to get out. I was pretty young. I didn't want to retire. And I told my partner that I was done. And he brought his son in to take my place, and I taught him how to do everything. But at that time, a pastor here came because Compass had just started. And he knew all the background of this, right, this pastor. And he said, Rick, you got to come work for the church. And immediately that message that Pastor Mike had given came into my mind. But it's like, oh, man, I don't want to do that. I mean, the last couple of years have been slow because the economy was bad. I'd had a month off in the summer for vacation. We never did time cards in your own company. We never had to do all of the other stuff that all the companies you work for do. And I thought to go back into the corporate environment is just not what I wanted to do. But I told him I'd pray about it, and then he was persistent. And so my wife and I sat down and we said, let's do this. So we did, and Pastor Mike didn't know me. We were in a big church, and everybody knows the pastor, but I really didn't know him. And so he wanted to interview me, so we had lunch together for 3 or 4 weeks. And he finally got to the point that he said, okay, I'm willing to take a risk with this guy. And I've been here 17 years doing what I can just to serve Christ. And, just like Jay, I had been in big companies to see how they ran. I was in a private company. I saw how they ran their operations. And then I was an owner where you roll up your sleeves and you do all the work yourself. Because you don't hire anybody unless you absolutely have to, and you don't buy a fax machine unless you absolutely have to. I mean, we did things because we didn't have a lot of money. We did things that we only had to do. And so God prepared me in all of those jobs to come here and work here, and it's been great.
What's a fax machine?
Yeah.
It's a fair question. No,
So we still have to fax things at Compass Bible Church. A lot of medical records still, they don't like PDFs. And so we also had a donor in Tustin to come along one day and say he wanted to give us a house. And that's really started the Tustin Property Fund, the Onward Fund. And he was about 80 years old, and that's the only way he would operate. He didn't have an email address. He didn't care about it. He was very, very wealthy, and he had the ways of doing things, and he wanted to fax. And that was in the last 5 or 6 years. So it's that funny thing you send documents over.
Makes funny noises, yeah. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's amazing when you look back at it and just realize God has his hand in every single detail of our life.
Every step.
Yeah.
And there were some very difficult times. I mean, I worked for the Lusk company. That's who fired me. It was a real estate development company. And the last 2 years there were horrible. I mean, values were dropping. We had plenty of debt. We were laying people off. I mean, it was horrible. And yet there were great times, too, throughout all those. But again, God prepared me and gave me the skills, I think, to do what I'm doing here today.
All right, that's awesome, and you do a fantastic job. And yeah, I think a lot of you, hear Rick as CFO here, but then just the involvement that he has with all of our church plants and continuing to train and develop them on, how to read P&Ls, how to understand their finances and those things. He's very, very useful for God's kingdom and useful for Compass Bible Church, and we're so thankful for him. So yeah, I'm glad you got to hear that and hear their stories if you didn't know it already. But Jay, one thing I did tee up, and I want you to just talk about a little bit, just because many of us know about Focal Point, but you don't really know the challenges, I think, that you have to take on between either nowadays compared to 5 years ago or just the radio ministry in general. So I'd love for you just to share, just to enlighten us a little bit of like, what are some of the challenges that Focal Point is up against now, and how our giving and help, praying for that can continue to lift that ministry up.
Well, the biggest challenge is the guy running it. If we can
Well,
get
we
past
know- we
him,
know that.
it's
I didn't
all-
wanna- I didn't
it's
wanna
all
say that.
Smooth sailing.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, Focal Point is, so I was actually talking to Bob about this earlier this morning. So Focal Point, this is his 25th year on the radio this year in July. So it started just, as some guys getting Pastor Mike's messages out on the radio, and they handled all of it, just kind of, he said, just go for it, And it's come to where we're at today. It was just a line item on the ministry budget, at the time until 2005, and then they transitioned it to a full nonprofit corporation. So, it's had small, sort of passively run beginnings up until, I guess, really until I started. They had a director before me that took it from 2005 until when I started, but it was very passively run. So they just sort of had some radio stations that were on, and when Pastor Mike talked to me about it, he goes, I don't know what it can be, if this is what God wants it to be, and he'll sustain it and grow it. But there's no support coming directly from Compass Bible Church. Like, the church does not give Focal Point money. Now, they provide a lot of benefits for us, like office space,
copiers,
Fax machine.
which Rick tries to charge me for.
Fax machines.
I don't even know what that is. And who's John Wooden? Never mind. But yeah, we're raising our own support, and the people at Compass are very generous. They support Focal Point, but we do our own support raising, and through the radio stations and through events like we do the golf tournament and the benefit dinner locally that we see now. It started. It was when I took over. It was like I don't know, 300 stations or something in that neighborhood. Now we're in the 850 range right now for radio stations, including Sirius XM, which is obviously covers the whole nation in that. So yeah, we just kind of keep plugging away slowly. I mean, the biggest challenges are, we are unlike a church, right, where it's more it should be incumbent upon the church members to give to their church first and financially support them. We're really a parachurch ministry. We're a secondary, donation spot. And so, when people are pulling back in times of difficult economies and things like that, we're going to be the ones that suffer first, and hopefully before church. And we do see that. So there's that challenge of, fundraising. I feel like I'm always fundraising. Again, this will be a repeat for some people. But, it's a ministry. And we hear about that from everybody, daily, from either it's a phone call, it's a letter we get, or it's an email mostly about how the ministry is blessing people. But yet I am here regularly having to raise funds to keep that going. And so big challenge for me, and a place you can always pray for me and our team, is to keep ministry first. Make sure that's the primary thing. Unfortunately, raising funds is right underneath it, and that is always something that's we're having to think about, because we need to keep going. We need to keep paying radio stations. We need to keep growing this voice of accurate Bible teaching, relevant Bible teaching that is so important that not too many people get. And I can't tell you how many people we hear from regularly that do not have the kind of teaching that we get every week here at Compass Bible Church. So it's really important from that standpoint. And, it's always a challenge, and it's always a challenge just from raising funds. I hate to say it, but that's our biggest our biggest challenge. And, so we provide, fun things for people to do, like the dinner, like the golf, and, we provide resources every month for people to, get something, a book from us, or, for a donation, so things like that. But the other big challenge is finding radio stations to go on. And I mean, it's not hard. I could go on any radio station, and I could spend a lot of money doing it, but I would be on at like 9 o'clock at night, where not too many people are listening, or some, place in the Midwest where only cows are listening, or something like that. So it's, that's the next hard part, is getting on a decent station at a good time. And because there's been these guys that you might have heard of, John MacArthur, Alistair Begg, Chuck Swindoll, David Jeremiah, Greg Laurie. I mean, those guys dominate the early morning times, on radio, and, for good reason. They're, really good, and they've been on for a long time, and people really appreciate them. And then you've even got, guys that haven't been with us for a while, like J. Vernon McGee and Adrian Rogers, that are still on the radio in a lot of places. So it's really hard for us, and for many like us, to get on at good times. But we just keep networking, and we keep being pleasant pests about things that are going on. So that's another great place to pray for us, is just being able to find some good times.
That's great, and thanks for sharing that. And if you didn't know this already, one part of Focal Point and Jay's team is, like, when Pastor Mike always makes comments as he's preaching, it's like, oh, we'll edit that out. That means that Jay and his team will take care of that on the back end. So anytime you hear that in a sermon or something like that, I always laugh, because I can see Jay being like, thanks, I appreciate that, and all that. So, but he does a great job with that. To conclude this, Rick, I don't want to... just one? That's it. That's all.
Oh, Jay, where did you get your sense of humor?
I think that's a fair question.
What? Where did you get what?
My sense of humor.
Sense of humor.
Sense of humor?
You got a fan out there of your humor. I think she's a fan. Either that, or she's upset about it and she wants to know who to blame.
Yeah, well, I am not sure you can blame, actually. I grew up as a class clown, and,
Did you?
yeah. Hard to imagine, right? Yeah, I don't know. It was, I did not know. I don't know. I'm just stupid enough to, not care too much about what I say up here, I guess.
Well, Rick, when you look at from a CFO standpoint, and obviously you have a hand in helping out all the church plants, just get them started and then get them moving on. I'd love for you just to share, like, just a challenge or a big challenge that you see with our church plants that, again, we may not know on the surface, and how we can be praying for those, especially as we get ready for North Texas.
So yeah, I mean, we have a centralized administration for all of our church plants until we kick them out. And we've kicked Huntington Beach out, so they're on their own. They're doing their own thing, separate 501c3 company. We do stay in touch with them. I sit on their board, so I'm able to still have some input into that. But for us, finances is always a big deal. But I will tell you, God has provided everything we need every time we need it. And we've always have had enough in the past to do what we believe God wants us to do. So I'm totally confident in that. I am the one that I don't want to say worries, but I watch it. I watch it closely. The thing that I've appreciated the most lately is we found a place in Frisco, Texas, for the North Dallas church to meet. But then the next biggest challenge these church plants have is they go into a school, a junior high or a high school, and then they grow, which is awesome, and they have more people and more problems and more staff, just the normal things we have here, but they don't have a home. And really the one thing that they need is they need homes. Huntington Beach got a place early on, and that helped them. Boise's doing fantastic, and they're meeting at a school, and another year or two they're going to outgrow that. And so, where do we go from there? So if you could pray about it's kind of the final thing for our church plants is to get them up and running in a place And then the last one is in a place that really works for a church. Not a Christian school that we're meeting in like we are in Frisco, not junior high schools that we meet in Tustin and in Boise, but just a place that can be their own. And to me, that's the biggest challenge. I don't work on that. I get to see how God works on that. And then I just get to help with the contracts and things like that when they come up. Like we signed an agreement to buy land in Boise. And we negotiated a letter of intent. We negotiated a contract. We signed the contract and went to the seller, and they go, oh, we're not so sure we want to do this. And they pulled the rug out from underneath it the day they were supposed to sign. So that got frustrating on the team. For me, being with my real estate background, I saw that happen all the time. A sale is not a sale until escrow closes. But for the team, it's like, oh, how did this happen? You know, and why did God do this and whatever? I'm going, well, this is just kind of the way it is. But they need a place. And so that, to me, that's the biggest challenge that we as a church have. Yeah.
Well, it's good, and continue to pray for our church plants. Huntington Beach is in a place where they're looking to plant their first church, and Treasure Valley is they're in a new school, and so they're all in different phases and stages that they need prayer for. So continue to keep them top of mind and be praying for them as well. So, but I'm glad we got to get you guys up here today. And again, I don't say it enough, but I'm extremely grateful for these two men. They are a source of encouragement and joy and laughter and humor for me as well. But I'm so grateful that I get to be a part of this ministry with the two of them. And so I wanted you to be able to make sure that you know their story and hear how God is using them. And again, this is just scratching the surface. He uses them in many other ways throughout this church and even outside of the church. And so I'd be remiss to say it's not about just them. Of course, as you know, they have wonderful wives, both Debbie and Lisa, that play a huge part in this. So I want to give them a round of applause. Then the round of applause for you after, but they got to deal with you, right? So I think no. So
10:33.
10:33. Well, I can keep going with it. I can get long.
High school ministry is at the doors.
That's all right. They can wait. They need to learn patience, if anybody, these high schoolers. They come throwing in tables like Frisbees. So anyway, all right. Well, let me pray for us, but good to see you all again. And, we got Pastor Mark next week for a flyover, but I will pray and let the high schoolers come in. God, we are so grateful for all that you do, for your good and perfect plan, a plan that many of us, we can attest to in our own life that we couldn't even imagine if we had the opportunity to years back. And I'm just thankful for what you've done with Rick and Jay and bringing them here to Compass Bible Church and how you continue to use them, both with Focal Point and as CFO and even here in ABF. Just thank you for their partnership and friendship. Lord, I pray that you would continue to bless their involvement in these ministries, allow it to be fruitful. Pray for their families as well. And we just thank you for all that you continue to do in all of our lives. So thank you for letting us have a good morning here together as a ministry. And we just pray that you were honored in this, and you can encourage us all to remember that you are the one that has the good and perfect plan, and you call us to be faithful to that, and knowing that you will provide all the fruit. In Jesus' name, amen.